common topic of conversation recently surrounding our kids and our schools. What role do cell phones play in education in 2025 and beyond? Governor Whitmer and others in our statewide leadership are calling for potential restrictions by law to cell phone usage in our classrooms. Close to home, already policies are being enacted in classrooms directly and across our local school districts. Here for more insight is someone who's already got a policy in place in his classroom, West Bloomfield High School, Director of Bands, Jesse Sachs. Mr. Sachs, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to talk to you about this because you're seeing the impact of cell phones and of social media on our classrooms each and every day on the front lines. You do have a policy in place in your classroom for your band students at this time. What is that policy?
Right. So one of our classes has been putting their cell phones up in pouches in the front of the room. Each student's assigned to a number, and they place their cell phone up in the pouch. I think that's been a really beneficial policy, partly because band, or rather all fine arts, are so much of a team environment whereby each student's participation directly affects the success of the rest of the class. So if we're working on something and for an example, the clarinets are on their cell phones, looking at Snapchat or any other social media platform, and I'm working with another section, then the clarinets don't hear what's going on with the other section, and they, and their lack of knowledge or lack of understanding of the trombone part, for an example, is going to affect them. So the cell phone policy of keeping it up in the front of the room seems to work well. It definitely improves the student engagement, and it also sets a better precedence for students to be fully engaged and focused. In our upper level wind ensemble, students have been using their cell phones strictly as tuners. So there's definitely some benefits to having cell phones in the classroom. They use them only as tuning devices. So, I grappled with the idea of having students put their cell phones up in the pouches for our second hour, which is our upper level group, and replacing that with a tuner. The downside of that, though, is the batteries kind of get, they get dead, or I've lost some batteries, and
Sure.
I have to keep replacing those. So at that point, once they're in the wind ensemble, they're mostly juniors and seniors, and they're mature enough at that point to know. Whoops, my light went off.
That's okay. It all happens.
They're mature enough to know that, okay, our phone is exclusively used for tuning, and at that point, I really haven't had any issues. So it's a little bit different based on the class and
Sure.
Based on their experience and knowledge of rehearsal etiquette. But all in all, I really do think the cell phone policy of not using them in class is beneficial. When I was in high school, even about 10, 12 years ago, we had that policy.
Of course.
And I think with the rise in social media and cyberbullying and so many different apps, I think it's definitely a more valuable educational experience for the students to refrain from their cell phones and have that separation between their social media outlet as well as their educational outlet. So definitely a proponent of it. In the few instances, like I mentioned in our upper level wind ensemble, whereby a tuning app or some other type of app may be necessary during instruction, I really do see great benefit in refraining from phone usage.
Jesse Sachs is with us. He's the band director at West Bloomfield High School. So we talk about cell phone bans in our classrooms, something that's being considered across the state, restrictions on cell phones in our classrooms and regulations on that may be coming down the pike from state Congress or from Governor Whitmer in the months or years to come, and also policies that are starting to be enacted in our local school districts. Jesse Sachs is joining us. He is the band director at West Bloomfield High School, who has a policy in place for cell phone usage in his classrooms. It's a partial restriction on it. In some classes, they put them up in pouches, and in others, they use them for specific purposes related to the band class itself. So when you put this policy in place, Jesse, what was the initial reaction from the kids who use their cell phones so ubiquitously throughout their day, both in and outside of classrooms?
So I actually instilled the policy of putting their phones up in the pouches at the beginning of class after many other teachers. So I think I received much less pushback than had I done it prior to the students being accustomed to this policy. I think they were a little bit surprised at first, but I kind of approached it with the understanding that it was in their best interest, in the class's best interest to get the optimal success. So I think for the most part they've been very receptive. I allow them when we take a 5-minute break, as our classes are quite long due to block scheduling. I do let them use their phone just for during that break, and then they put them back in the pouches when we resume instruction. So again, yeah, it's worked well. And then in our wind ensemble, where the students use them for tuning purposes, I really haven't had any issues with students neglecting that policy. And at that point, they have a solid understanding of rehearsal etiquette. They've been in the program for a couple of years, so they're all more on board.
And so there seems to be this prevailing debate about whether cell phones should be used differently in classes so that they're not being a distraction with social media, with texting and communication, or whether or not they should be fully put away like you do with some of your classes in those pouches. And so as in terms of results that you've seen since enacting these policies, how have they maybe improved the educational outcomes for your band students?
Sure. So each class period, I feel like we get a lot more done. For an example, when I give the downbeat, students are more engaged. They start together, and we don't have to do as many repetitions because students aren't distracted by their phones or there's someone texting them. And when we're actually playing, I noticed previously that students would, even subconsciously get distracted by a buzz on their phone or a message or even a vibration in their pocket. And so now those external factors are completely eliminated. And I think both they're physically engaged and mentally engaged in playing their instruments and doing the best they can within the ensemble.
You can get more information on policy changes in the West Bloomfield School District as they relate to cell phones in class or anything more at wbsd.org, or follow them on Facebook at West Bloomfield Schools. I recently spoke to Dr. Danya Bazzi, the superintendent of the West Bloomfield School District, who also mentioned something that you're kind of implementing as we speak in your woodwind ensemble in particular, which is partial usage of cell phones as a tool in the classroom to improve educational learning activities and outcomes. How do you see that maybe expanding in years to come as the school district puts a little bit more of an emphasis on using them as tools and as technology improves to maybe even be a bigger help to our band students?
Sure, I think with the ever-changing technology, I almost anticipate the school district or many school districts from throughout the state restricting internet access or data or any means of non-educational use of their phones. So whether it's restricting any internet access or, turning off it on social media apps, I think that would probably be the next step. That way, their phones could be beneficial for education. I think being specific and selective on what the school allows students to access would be optimal.
Plenty more on this topic to come in months forward and in the years ahead as technology improves and policies go in place here in the West Bloomfield School District or other several school districts across the greater West Bloomfield area and far beyond. Jesse, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.